Okay, cool. We're doing it live. So today, gonna share a project, show you how you can create an AI assistant, a chatbot type thing, powered by an Excel sheet, OpenAI, and a vector database, Pinecone as well. The reason I made this, a few things. So firstly, there's a lot of like chat with your data examples on YouTube. But one of the things I was always interested in doing was like, how do I potentially use data in an Excel format to power a chat solution? And this kind of shows you how to do that as well. So there's a few things that you'll need to make this work. You'll need an OpenAI API key. You will get that from here. If you're signed up with OpenAI, go to your profile. That's where your API keys are set up. You'll also need a Pinecone account and API key. Is free to sign up, and then once you're signed up, you just go and create an API key in your account. It's pretty straightforward. Then you could also use, or is handy to have, a Hugging Face account and API key. You don't need this specifically for this tutorial, but there is an aspect of this tutorial where you could load data from Hugging Face instead of from CSV file. I do make that option available. And if you want to do that, you just go to Hugging Face, you sign up, and then you're able to create your API keys in here. The nice thing is I've built this in Colab. I'm a big fan of Colab, but what's really nice is to make this work, all you need to do is once you've got your API keys, you go to this key icon here for your version of this sheet. I'll share a link in the video description. And then you just add in your API key and you name it. You add the name just as I've made the names here, and then this code will work for you. Cool. And then something else we'll need some data to power the chat solution. I'm going to use a Tesco dataset. I'll come back to that in a second. Actually, no, we'll do that now. So I'm going to use a Tesco dataset. So this is an FAQs dataset from Tesco that somebody made available on Kaggle. And it's basically like the FAQs. And what we're going to do using this data is create basically like a Tesco online grocery AI assistant. So the data is there. You can download it from Kaggle, or in the sheet, I've also made a version of it available here in a Google sheet, and I'll make this public as well. And then all we need to do is download the data set. That will start downloading. And then we just need to go to the files section of our Colab notebook. And then from our downloads, we just upload that here. And there we've got that. And then what will happen is we can use that data set for this. When you close this notebook, that data set will delete. But as long as you've done the steps to upload it to Pinecone, you don't actually need that again afterwards, and you can come back and you can test your solution. There is also an alternative to use an IMDb dataset here, IMDb dataset, if you wanted to do like a movies discovery chatbot, but we'll do the Tesco one today for this. Okay, cool. First thing I'm gonna do, so to kick off, you'll need to do some installs, so install some packages. I'm going to start running that now. It takes a minute or two to do. But while I do that, I'll just talk you through the plan quickly. Cool. Okay, so the plan is we're going to have our data source, which will be an Excel file. And we've already put that into our Colab notebook. Then we're going to use something called an embedding model. If you've done this before, you'll know what that is. But basically what that does is it will convert the data into numbers, which makes it easier for the AI model to process. We will then upload that converted data set, that data turned into numbers, into Pinecone. Pinecone is a great vector database I use a lot, super easy to use, and as I may have said before, it's free. Then once it's in that data set, we're going to call it from that data set, and we're going to use the same embedding model we used in the previous stage, and we're also going to use an OpenAI LLM, one of the ChatGPT 4 versions, to basically process the user's query and retrieve information that is similar to that from the dataset to then create a response. And that interaction between the user and the AI assistant will all be delivered via a Gradio chat UI, and it's super cool, super clean, very easy to do. And So yeah, basically the key stages are we're going to convert that data to numbers so we can find the relevant information. We're going to store that data as numbers in Pinecone, and then we're going to use the AI model to generate the answers based on the user's question and the retrieved information as well. So that's the plan. Cool. We can see that our installs are still taking a second to do. So yep, we will we'll give that a second. Okay, it's done. Brilliant. Cool. Okay, so we've installed the packages, and now we're going to set up our API keys, which we've set up in our secrets in our Colab notebook. So we just run this cell, and we're going to get a print back saying our Pinecone API key has been set up and our OpenAI API key. Now we're going to move into the step of starting to process our data. So we're going to load our data from the CSV file. We've got it in here, but then what we're going to do is we're going to load it to use like in this workflow. So as you'll see here, I've pre-built this like little interactive widget thing. And if you had multiple CSV files, you could select them from this drop down, but we've only got one in here, so it's there. And then we just hit load dataset, and then we can see that dataset has loaded. If we were doing this from Hugging Face, there's a similar approach where we can just grab a dataset from Hugging Face. You will need your Hugging Face API key, and you would just run this code here, and it would give you a similar box to put the name of the dataset in. And then, like from this example, you would, so here, if I wanted to load this dataset in this way, I would just grab this dataset name here. I would copy it from here, and I would paste it into the box where I'm told to, and then I run it, and then that would load the data set from Hugging Face as well if I wanted to. But we're not going to do that. We're using the CSV version. Okay, so we're just going to check that our data set looks good. So we're going to print just a simple first row of that data set. So we can see this is online grocery FAQs, delivery and collection basics. That's got a question in it, where Tesco delivers to, and then an answer that you've got there. And this is good information because this is well-structured information that we can use to power our AI assistant. So now we're going to just print a few more rows of the data set. And you don't have to do this bit, but I quite like it because it just gives a little bit more information. So it tells us how many rows of information are in the data set, gives us a few examples of the information contained within it, and then also tells us what types of information, the formats of the information that are in it as well. Now we are going to check our data set to make sure there are no like blank rows or columns of information where the information is important, and just making sure there's no blank information in those, because if that does exist, then it can cause problems for the AI assistant later, where it tries to kind of call information and the information isn't available. So we're just going to run this, and we can see here again I've got a little UI widgety thing here which kind of shows us what it looks like. So the ones I'm most concerned about are the topic and the question and the answer, and we can see that we've got actually no blank rows of information here, so I'm quite happy with that. That's fine. If, for example, I saw in this question section or the answer section there was like 30 blank rows, I would tick this box here and then I would delete those rows, and that just cleans up our data as well. Okay, so we've loaded our data, and now what we're going to do is choose some information that we're going to send to the vector database. And the first thing we need to choose are the bits of information that we're going to use for the AI assistant to basically, well, actually not the AI assistant. What we need to be able to do is look up or retrieve information that is similar to a user's prompt. And in order for us to find that information, we basically need a key of sorts, a lookup key of sorts. So if I ask a question about deliveries, in the database in Pinecone, we will need some information that would ideally contain like a little bit of information, which includes the words deliveries or related words like delivery or I don't know, something. contextually similar information. So anyway, I'll show you what that looks like. So we run this and we can see that we're going to choose our embedding key, and we've got a few options here from the dataset. So we've got the topic, online grocery FAQs, the subtopic, delivery and question and collection basics, question where Tesco delivers to, and an answer, we deliver to most UK residential addresses. Now, for this, I'm actually going to, you could choose the answer, so to have that as the lookup key, but it will probably contain quite a lot of information. And sometimes what you want is a lookup key that contains quite concise information, but is generally quite representative of the relevance of a piece of information. So I'm going to select the question and I'm going to select the subtopic. And what happens is when I do this, confirm embedding fields, so I've selected these. So what will happen is these, for each row of information, the subtopic and the question will be combined into a single piece of information. So it will basically concatenate delivery and collection basics and where Tesco delivers to. And then when we embed that and send that to Pinecone, it will convert that information, those combined pieces of information, into numbers. And then when a user asks a question about where does Tesco deliver to, that prompt will be converted into numbers, and the numbers from that prompt will be looked up against to find similar information, and it will find the numbers that were created when these two values were converted. Anyway, we've chosen them. You'll see how it works in a minute. Okay, so now it says select the information to give the assistant to inform the response it generates. So what we're doing here is we are selecting metadata to associate with the lookup keys we've chosen here. So you can actually choose all the pieces of information here and have those as metadata. What that means is that when these values, when the numbers from these combined values is triggered, it will also enable us to return the answer that was associated to them as well. So for the metadata fields or values, I'm just going to actually choose all of them, and we've got a subsequent control in the chatbot which actually allows us to select which ones we want the chatbot to have available to it to answer a user's query. So we're going to confirm these as our metadata fields. Cool. Okay. Now we need to choose an AI model to convert our information to numbers. And we've got a few options here. I've kind of pre-programmed this. And these are all OpenAI models. So we've got text embeddings large, small, and ADA002. ADA002 is actually an older model and generally probably isn't used that much anymore. And for this purpose, I'm going to go with text embedding large, which is 3072. This is like the most powerful embedding model that OpenAI makes available, and it allows a greater level of precision when you're trying to retrieve information based on the user's prompt, basically. And you'll see here that the important thing here to look at are the dimensions. So this has dimensions of 3072 and 1536. And what you need to do is just make sure that the dimensions for your model matches the dimensions of your Pinecone database index. So here you'll see I've got an older Pinecone database that I set up, and you can see this has got dimensions of 3072. So when I later use an OpenAI model to process the queries, that will work great because they're matching and they're basically designed for each other. Here you can see I've got a couple of other indexes. One I called product search, another one I called hybrid search, and you can see these have got dimensions of 384. Now, if I try to send user queries to this via the OpenAI embedding model, text large 3, that won't work because the dimensions are basically incompatible. So it's just something that you've got to be aware of. Now, the way I've built this sheet, it selects and will create your Pinecone index with the correct dimensions based on the model you select at this stage. So, oh, hold on. Okay, so confirm selection, sorry, yep. You can see here, you just want to kind of flick around when it's selected, and you can see we've model selected, text embedding 3 large, dimensions set as 3072. Okay, cool. So we've chosen our model. We've chosen the bits of our dataset that we want to use. Now we're going to create our Pinecone database index. So you already need to be signed up to Pinecone and to have put all your API keys in. And what we're going to do here is just create our index. And you can go and do that in Pinecone by this thing, create index, and you go through that process. But I've actually kind of worked that out in this sheet. So we're just going to create an index. We're going to call it demo. We'll just call it demo. And you can see I've already pre-configured the code so that it selected the dimensions and it selected the cloud that you're going to use and the region that you're going to use. These are selected in this way. You can't really change them because this is Pinecone's free plan, so you just have to use what they've got here. But the most important bit that is that it's pre-selected the dimensions based on the OpenAI model we selected earlier. So we just hit this button, create index. And there we can see creating index, and we can see our index has been created, and it says dimensions 3072. We've got nothing in our index at the moment. If for any reason you had a pre-existing Pinecone index and you wanted to load that instead, you could by pushing this button, and it will enable you to load that index just by inserting the index name. You'll just have to make sure that you're using the correct embedding model. It would have to be an OpenAI embedding model to use this code, and it would have to be one of these to do that. Or you're free to kind of go and modify the code and do whatever you want if you want to do that. Okay, so we've created our index. We're just going to run a quick check to see that it's all running okay. So actually, yeah, we're going to connect to the index and just make sure it's running. So we insert the index name, connect to index. Successfully connected to index. I also put in another check in here, like if you want to check your index name, current index is demo. So we know we're working that. That's all working fine. So now we're going to upload our data to Pinecone. And I say this is optional because if you already have a Pinecone index with data in it, you don't need to do that. But we do in this instance because we're creating a new index and we're going to populate it with the information from that Tesco FAQs information. So we hit this button, and we're going to see that it's going to start processing the uploading of that data, and it's pretty quick. It works through it pretty quickly. So just give that a minute or two. Oh, what we can do while we're doing that, we can also go into Pinecone and we can refresh this page, and we can see that our demo index is here. So this is the demo index that we created. So if we want to, we can come in and check that. And actually we can see that our records are being inserted here. And then what also is quite interesting is that you can see this is the conversion of that information into numbers. And we can see that our metadata has been appended to those key values. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Okay, so we're back in the sheet and we can see that 100% of that information has been processed and run. And now we're going to run our AI assistant. And I've put a few cells in here to run a few checks, because actually what you can do is, if you've already done the steps above and you already have an index set up, you don't need to go through those creation steps if you don't want to. You can just jump to the AI assistant setup. So I kind of built this in if you want to come back to it later. And what this first cell does is it just checks if we're connected to an index, and it also confirms the embedding model we use. So if I hadn't pre-selected these things, this code here would show that actually there are a couple of errors. And then what the next bits would do is it would allow you to assign an index, So you would just input your index name and it would activate that. And then it would also allow you to select a model as well. Kind of just some additional checking steps I put in, but we don't need to do that. So now we're going to do a simple code test, just to see how information is retrieved based on us inputting some values. So, okay, so here you can see in this code, this is the code running, and you can see I've got an example query in here. Can I choose my delivery times? And we can see that the query is vectorized using model text embeddings large. And that was the dimension. Now we can see what response comes back, the raw response. And here we can see the raw response coming back. So this query was converted into numbers by the OpenAI embedding model, text embedding large 3. That was sent to the Pinecone index. It then ran a lookup against those lookup values that we set in the beginning. So the question and the topic. And then it returned the metadata answer that was associated with those topics. Okay, cool. So yeah, we ran that test just to make sure that the underlying process of running a query and retrieving data from the Pinecone index works. Now what we're going to do is just configure our chat assistant, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So we run this cell, and you'll see under this cell we've got a few options of things that we can do. So in order for the assistant to answer a user's query, we need to equip it with the information that is retrieved from the database from Pinecone. And in order to do that, what I did was I created this little widget thing, and depending on the structure of your data, you might actually find that there's a number of fields of information from your CSV file that you might want to append. So if you were doing like a product recommendation chat assistant, you might find that you wanted to include that you'd have a field here maybe for product price, product description, product name, and you could select multiple options there, and all of those bits of information would be passed to the assistant as context in the context fields. So yeah, the context is the information that the assistant has to generate a response. And then what I also included was something called link fields. And what the link field does is it appends a link to further information if that also includes in your dataset. So for example, if it was a product recommendation AI, you might have a link to that product that you want to be generated, not generated, but appended to the assistant's response as well. And again, you would have the option to select those in here. So in this test code dataset, there isn't any kind of like link to further information. So we're not going to use the link field, but we're going to choose our context field. And for the context field, I'm actually going to choose the answer, and I'm going to choose the, I'll choose the answer. We'll just go with the answer. So we do update fields, and it says context fields updated to answer, link fields updated to nothing. And after all of that, now it's time to power up our assistant. To do that, we run this cell. And you'll see that it starts to generate a Gradio interface. Now it will generate it in the notebook itself, or you can click on this URL and it will generate it here. And let's zoom in a bit. Cool. So you can actually add like pre-selected questions here if you wanted to. And those are controlled here. But yeah, let's see how it works. So I want to return an item. See what it says. You can return them. Okay, that looks pretty good. Certain products, so two structured products can't be returned. Nice, okay. I want to change my Tesco delivery time, please. Okay, here we go. You can change your test code delivery time before 11:45. That looks pretty good. My items were damaged. What can I do? I can't eat this food. See what happens there. That's quite... If an item was damaged, okay, cool. That looks good. What else could we ask? There's a problem with my order. What do I do? So there we go. I actually think that works quite nicely. There are a few things that you can tweak in this to change the performance slightly. So I haven't built controls like or a UI thing for this, but the code to edit it is pretty simple. So within this AI assistant, there's a few things you can modify if you want. So I've got GPT-4 running as the completion model here, and this is kind of one of the higher grade GPT-4 models. We can switch that out to one of the smaller ones, one of the cheaper ones, and we can see how it performs. That will affect the performance slightly. One of the other things here is there's a value here called top K3, and what that controls is the number of pieces of information are brought back from the database to form the response. And sometimes we use a slightly larger number for this so that we basically have like a wider net of information that is taken from the database and brought back to the AI assistant to process. Now that can be beneficial in some ways because it means that it's got more information. You've got a higher likelihood that relevant information will be brought back. Sometimes there can be some drawbacks with that though, because the more pieces of information you bring back, the more information you're passing to the model, and that costs you a little bit more in terms of model API queries. I've chosen 3 because it's quite a nice number. I did run it just using returning 1, the top response, but I found sometimes that didn't always contain enough information, and sometimes there are supporting pieces of information in a wider set of retrievals from the database. So yeah, you can play around with that though, see what works for you there as well. Then the other things, there's the prompt that is used for the AI assistant. So this one is pretty basic. It says answer the question based on the context below, provide relevant details. If the context doesn't provide enough information to answer the question, say sorry, I'm afraid I can't help you with that. So let's see this. Who will win the next Super Bowl? See what it says. So here we can see that triggers the default response there, and it works relatively well. Now look, if you're trying to do this seriously, there's a bunch of other things that you would do to control responses here, but just from a very, very simple toy example that we're using here, it works pretty well. And that's about it really. Hopefully this has been helpful. I like this because I've spent a bunch of time like trying to build these things in the past, and there's quite a few steps in there that you have to get your head around. Stuff like the embeddings values and making sure that's correct. And really what I wanted to do with this sheet was make something that was super accessible, that anyone could, within a few clicks, get an AI assistant up and running with their own code, and also give you a basis or something that you can take and modify potentially for your own use cases as well. So yeah, that's it really. In the sheet, if you want to connect with me, I've provided my LinkedIn details. Just yeah, hit me up. Always happy to connect with people, always happy to chat. And yeah, please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you liked it as well. And if you didn't, don't worry about it, you know. All right. Thanks for your time, and yeah, happy coding.